Scary Uber Experience by Lucky Butterfly 800. This happened a couple of months ago. I was at a friend's house one night and didn't realize how late it was, around 2 a.m. I love sleeping in my own bed, so I decided to call an Uber home instead of staying over. My friend lives in a more rural area of town, so it took a while to get an Uber, and it was around a 40-minute drive back to my house. Upon getting into the Uber, the first comment he made was telling me how pretty I was. Immediately, red flags started going off in my head. I'm already a very anxious person and have always been afraid of taking Ubers alone, especially at night, so I was already on edge before the comment was made. I just replied, "Thank you," and he started to drive me home. My friend was a boy, and I assumed the Uber saw him standing at the doorway before we left, because around 5 minutes into the drive, he asked, "Was that your boyfriend?" At this point, my gut feeling tells me something is very wrong. I reply with yes and say nothing further. He then proceeded to go on about how lucky my boyfriend was, and again, how pretty I was. At this point, I just didn't answer. Around 10 minutes into the drive, the Uber driver tells me that he knows a quicker way to get to my house, and we're going to take a detour. I immediately started to panic, because as an anxious Uber rider, I consistently watch the Uber app on the driver's phone and need to be following the map. Also, this detour seemed to be going deeper down the rural roads versus into the city. I then called my dad, but because it was past 3 a.m. at this point, he didn't answer the phone. I then decided to call 911. The operator answers me right away, and I act like I'm talking to my dad on the phone. She immediately sensed that I was unable to tell her the exact situation, but I acted like I was talking to my dad and telling him that I was in an Uber and would be home soon. She then started to ask me questions about the color of the car by having me simply answer yes or no, the make of the car, my location, etc. She asked if I was in danger, and I said I don't know. After telling her my location, she then told me to tell the Uber driver to get on the highway because the detour he had taken consisted of more rural roads. Thankfully, we were only around 5 minutes from the highway and then another 10 minutes to the police station. She told me to tell the Uber driver to drop me off at a house in a neighborhood close to the police station. She gave me an exact address and advised that an officer would be waiting there for me to take me home. After politely trying to beg the Uber driver to change the address, he finally did and continued to go in that direction. I stayed on the phone with the operator until I got to the destination. Sure enough, an officer was waiting a couple of houses down. I got out of the Uber and walked straight towards the car. I'm not sure if I was overreacting about the situation due to my anxiety, especially by calling 911, but alarms were going off so loud in my head that I genuinely thought I needed to in that situation. I now only take Uber alone in the daytime and always share my ride with my parents or my friends. I think I met a Craigslist killer by ShayBaby2424. When I was 19, I was looking for a room to rent in the city I was moving to for college. It was about an hour away from my family. I wasn't having much luck, and my mom started helping me look for a place. She found an ad on Craigslist for a room for $300 in a house, everything included. The homeowner was a man, and he rented the additional rooms upstairs to other women while he lived in the finished basement. The ad stated he rarely ever saw the other roommates because he had a kitchen and his own entrance downstairs, and that he preferred women because he had issues with male roommates in the past partying and causing damage. We decided to take a look since it was the cheapest that we could find in the area. My mom and I went to the house to view it. Decent house, decent neighborhood. He opened the door and was very welcoming. He was middle-aged, and the kitchen and living room were furnished and nicely clean. My mom loves to talk and get to know people, so they were engaged in conversation while I stood there quietly and observed the place. He then said he would show me my room. We head towards the staircase to go up, as I thought, since he said on the phone my room was upstairs with the other roommates. But he opens another door and we follow. He takes us down to the basement and opens a door to a very small room. No closet and no windows. He proceeded to say this is my room and I will be sharing the bathroom in the hallway with him, and this bedroom did not have a door on it. I was definitely thinking absolutely not, this is weird, but they were so deep in conversation that I couldn't interject. He then leads us to the upstairs and shows us the other rooms, which the doors were open, and says that they are currently rented. He then starts telling us elaborate stories about the other women. Not very nice stories, describing drinking problems. My mom was listening intently, but I took the time to investigate further. I looked in all 3 rooms and the bathrooms. There was furniture, but not a single item in there that looked like it belonged to a woman. No clothes or anything, only men's clothes in one of the closets. He had no problem with me creeping around his tenants' rooms without their permission. I then heard him tell my mom that he has some of his stuff in their closets, but they don't mind, and I'm just like, why the hell would a tenant pay you for you to use their space as storage. I was feeling really uncomfortable and started moving them back downstairs as they talked. My mom had mentioned when we arrived that her and my dad were going on vacation the next week, but I couldn't go because I had to work. He brought it up again and that I should come by next week and have dinner with him and the roomies to see if we could all get along. I said sure and we left. As soon as we got in the car, I told my mom I would definitely not be living there. She was dumbfounded. I had to explain to her not only did he lie about the room I would be in, that I was not supposed to be in the basement with him as well as share a bathroom with him and he didn't have a damn door, but also did she not notice how no one else lived there? She still didn't get it and thought I was just being paranoid and thought he was nice and it was a cheap deal. I had to explain it to my stepdad and get him to tell her by no means would I be living there. I tried to report the post, but by the time I got home that day, he had removed it. I think he planned on murdering me at dinner or abducting me and holding me hostage in that basement room that had no way to escape. I hope that guy hits a tree with a car one day. Edit. Some details have been coming back to me since I've been answering all of your questions. This happened in 2011, so it's been quite a while. When he took us upstairs, there was a wide landing that was surrounded by the rooms. As soon as we got up there, he motions towards me one of the rooms and starts this long, intricate story about the woman who lived there and talking about her alcoholism and crazy ex. He was very exaggerated in how he talked, with a lot of gestures. My mom stood there listening to him. I don't know if it was sheer distraction or she didn't want to be rude and stopped listening. But either way, I don't recall her ever having a good look around any of those rooms. I went and looked. All doors were open and had neatly made beds with dark wood bed frames, bureaus with mirrors and nightstands. There were sliding mirror closets and they were empty except for one had men's clothes hanging and pushed against one corner. Nothing was on the nightstands other than a lamp and nothing on the bureaus. I then went to the bathrooms and there was nothing on the vanity in them other than hand soap. I looked in the showers too, but nothing other than bar soap. The bedroom on the left had an empty suitcase laying open in the middle of the bed. This was one of the rooms with the empty closet. After seeing all this, I came back down to the landing and started slowly heading down the stairs. They were still talking and absent-mindedly followed me down to the living room. That's when he mentioned dinner and we left shortly after. I think that's why Mom didn't notice a lot and didn't believe me at first. She didn't take more than a quick glance upstairs, and when we were in the basement, he was just as talkative. A commenter on here who works with law enforcement pointed out that this was probably a sex trafficking situation. The bedroom in the basement is where a victim is kept, drugged, and abused until broken and then trafficked. I honestly think this is more plausible with the situation, as well as my city is actually a hotspot for that. I am so grateful we got out of there, and I hope my experience could help someone one day notice the details and get out of the situation safely. Every night my entire town locks down for 12 minutes. I finally learned why. You know the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, where the local diner serves coffee in mugs stamped with your name, and everyone will lend a hand to a neighbor in need, a place where generations of families grew up together? Well, that's the sort of place where I live. Sure, it's a bit rustic. Hell, I barely have reliable internet, but it's nice enough for us. It's the kind of place where time feels like it's standing still, except for one thing, the nights. The nights here are a little different. I've lived here all my life, and there's no place I'd rather be, or at least, that's what I used to think. This place has its quirks, like any small town, but there's a big one that stands out for us. You see, every night, without fail, at 11:38 p.m., the town locks down. I'm not talking about just closing up shops and less people being out and about. I'm talking about a real lockdown. Doors slam shut and are barred. Windows rattle and lock, and everyone knows they have to be inside and stay inside, at least for what happens next. The next part is strange. No one ever sees anything moving out there directly, but we all just know. We just know that somehow, something outside is trying to get in. An eerie silence falls over the streets. It's like the whole town is holding its breath. Then, in 12 minutes exactly, it's just over. I've always wondered why it happens at exactly 11:38 p.m. People here don't talk about it much, but when they do, they whisper. They say it's just the way things are, that it's been happening for as long as anyone can remember, but I know better. I've seen it, whatever it is. The first time I noticed it, I was still pretty young. I think I was 10 or 11. I'd stayed up late reading some of my favorite comic books. My parents warned me, like many other kids in that town, that we had to go to bed early, but if we did get up, then absolutely no leaving the house or leaving any windows or doors open. I was not asleep, but I was still following the rules when I heard the strangest sound. It was a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I looked out the window, and that's when I saw it. The streets were empty, but there was a presence. It's hard to describe. It wasn't a person or an animal. It was something else, something that didn't feel like it belonged. It moved with its strange, jerky motion, like it wasn't entirely in control of its own body. It radiated a disturbing sense of distortion that made my head hurt, and my eyes had a difficult time focusing on it. I could feel this overwhelming sense of hunger that made my skin crawl. Before I knew it, it was over. It had passed my house, and I realized I had been staring out my window with a hypnotic daze. It was almost midnight, and I went to sleep, and I did not tell my parents about the disturbing thing that I had seen. I didn't see it again for years, but the feeling just never left. Every night at 11:38 on the dot, when the town shuts down, I know it's there. We all try to act like it's not, just behave like we have a strict curfew and that nothing is really out there. Yet the people who are too bold or foolish think that it's nothing. Well, they don't last long. Those of us who are still here know that whatever that thing is, it's out there. Stalking, hunting, looking for anything, an open window, a cracked door. Disappearances are frequent, especially for such a small town. The police have a whole song and dance for anyone who goes missing from the outside. But when it's a resident, well, it's more of a case where the families of the victims are reprimanded for not having known better. No one knows why the window of time is so mercifully brief. Almost just as suddenly as it starts, it's over. By 11:50 p.m., the streets are quiet again, and the town feels normal, but it's not normal. It never was. People here have learned to live with it. They lock their doors, shut their windows, and pretend it's not happening. I asked my parents why we don't just move, and they never gave me a good answer. All they said was, it wouldn't do any good. We have to endure. It has to be here. It's safer for everyone if it's here. It didn't make any sense. I know people can get attached to places, but it felt crazy to me. I couldn't just pretend this was normal. Not after what I saw. Not after what I felt. There was something out there, and it was worse than anyone would believe. It was just recently that I saw it again. It was a normal night, at least as normal as nights could be in my town. I was getting ready to go to bed when I noticed that my cat Quincy was missing. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find him. Then I heard something and looked through the window to spot a familiar shape, and my heart sank. He was outside. He must have gotten out when I had come home earlier and was sauntering along the sidewalk, clueless to the impending danger. The time was 11:36 p.m. I had no idea if the creature did anything to animals, but I did not want to find out. I had never let Quincy outside before, and he did not come back to my shouted calls for his return. I had to do something dangerous and stupid to save him. I rushed outside, sprinting toward him and trying to grab him and bring him in before it was too late. I managed to reach him and picked him up, but then I froze when I sensed a presence and I was scrambling back to my door. Quincy's ears folded back and he hissed. I felt paralyzed, and then I thought I saw it again. It was different this time, larger and more overwhelming than before. Its presence seemed to fill the entire street, pressing against the houses like an unseen force. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat. To my horror, it seemed to finally regard me. Quincy jumped out of my hands and ran back to my house. He had fortunately evaded whatever interest the thing might have had with him. The creature's head twisted unnaturally in my direction, its distorted features coalescing into more recognizable shapes. Staring into the grotesque visage forced a scream out of me as I beheld the blasphemous impossibility. I turned and sprinted away, screaming like a maniac, my heart hammering against my ribcage with such force that each beat felt like it might crack my chest open. The sound of its pursuit echoed behind me, a wet slapping noise like a monstrous jellyfish gliding across the ground. Its deafening roar filled the air, shaking the ground beneath my feet as I ran for my life. I did not know know if I could get away. No one I knew had been outside and survived. I ducked into an alley, my hands shaking as I pressed myself against the wall. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, and I could feel sweat dripping down my face. I didn't dare look around the corner, and I didn't dare move. And then I heard the harrowing screams. They sliced through the air, piercing and full of terror. My heart raced as I strained to see who was making them, but all I could make out were shadowy figures caught in the open. The screams were short, sharp, and then they were shallowed by the night. The deafening silence that followed only added to the fear weighing down on me. I stayed pressed against the wall, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The darkness seemed to come alive with every creak and rustle, amplifying my fear. I held my breath until I heard the sound of the creature moving away, and then, just like that, it was gone. But the eerie stillness lingered, haunting me even after the clock struck 11:50 p.m. The streets were once again quiet, but my nerves were still on edge. I stumbled back to my house, every step feeling like a race against time. Quincy waited anxiously at the door and bolted inside with me, seeking shelter. The horrible night had left me shaken, but grateful to be alive. Whatever that thing is, it does not belong in this world. It's not of this time or place. Its presence is so unsettling. It makes your mind ache just to catch a glimpse of it. No one can tell of its origins. Maybe they are lost in the depths of history. But whatever its history, it remains. Always there, lurking in the shadows every night without fail. At that point, I did the one thing you probably think everyone should have done by now. I left my hometown. I moved to the largest city I could reach to get away from it all. My parents did not approve. In fact, they tried to tell me I could not go. I was desperate to get out of there, that I had to sneak away in the early morning when they could not interfere. I never understood why we all stayed there and tried to ignore the eldritch nightmare that haunted us all that night. It seemed so simple, and I felt better at first. The city felt alive with the hum of traffic and the distant chatter of people during the day, a cacophony that made me feel safe, anonymous. Indeed, I thought I'd left the nightmare behind, that the creature was just a memory, a relic of the past that I could bury. My new apartment is a cozy studio on the 5th floor with a view of the bustling streets below. High enough where looking out of the window does not fill me with a dread at night. Unfortunately, something happened last night that was shattered the fragile illusion of my peaceful transition. On the first night in my new place, I sat on the edge of my bed, flipping through a magazine to distract myself from the creeping unease that had settled into the pit of my stomach. The clock on the nightstand read 11:28 p.m. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that the creature was gone, and that I was safe now. But the weight of the past lingered, a shadow in the corner of my mind that I couldn't shake. By 11:38 p.m., the city outside of my window was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of traffic and distant music had faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness. I tried to focus on the magazine, but my eyes kept drifting towards the window, the darkness beyond the glass pressing in on me. And then I heard it, a soft, tentative slap against the pane. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, the magazine slipping from my fingers and falling onto the floor. The sound was light, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill coursing through my veins. I told myself it was nothing. I was just being paranoid, but then it came again. Another tap, this time more insistent. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My eyes were fixed on the window. The darkness beyond it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a faint scratching sound, like claws on glass. My heart sank. I knew that sound, and I knew what it meant. Slowly, with my legs trembling beneath me, I rose from the bed and approached the window. My hand reached for the curtain, hesitated, and then, with a deep, shaky breath, I pulled it back. What I saw made me freeze in terror. The creature was perched on the fire escape outside my window, its twisted form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its presence seemed to fill the room, pressing in on me with an unspeakable horror. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The creature's head tilted to the side, its gaze looked on mine, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. It was here, it had followed me, and then, as if in slow motion, its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and it let out a low, guttural growl. The sound shattered the paralysis that held me in place. I stumbled back, my voice finally breaking free in a raw, terrified scream. The creature's form seemed to blur and shift, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable darkness, and then everything went black. I regained consciousness, and I know it's not over. There is no escape from this thing that had followed me. I consider what my parents had said when I asked them why we never moved. Then, with dawning horror, I realized the truth of their words: it's safer for everyone if it's here. They did not mean it's safer for us. They meant it's safer for everyone else. They knew the danger. They stayed to keep it there. Now, in my ignorance, I have made a huge mistake. Somehow, it knew I left. It had followed me here, to a place where over 1 million people will soon know about its existence, and maybe even more, if it moves beyond that. I am so sorry for bringing it here. I didn't know. Please, for your own safety, stay inside between 11:38 p.m. and 11:50 p.m. By now, it might not be safe wherever you are as well.